The first time I saw it, I thought it was a mistake. I was sitting in the bank office, pen in my hand, ready to sign the refinancing papers. The room was quiet except for the sound of the air conditioner and the soft clicks from a keyboard. My eyes moved down the page, slow at first, then faster. Next to Rebecca's name, under marital status, it said single. My heart jumped. I checked again. It was there, clear, printed in dark ink. Not married. Not separated. Just single. I swallowed hard. The clerk avoided my eyes like he already knew. I flipped to another page. The same words stared back at me. Another page. Same thing. My chest felt tight, like the room had shrunk around me. When I asked the clerk if this was wrong, he said gently, "These were completed before today." It felt like someone had pulled the floor from under me. That night at home, I asked Rebecca about it. She didn't cry. She didn't shake. She looked straight at me and said, "It is simpler that way." I did not yell. I did not break anything. I just nodded slowly. Inside me, something changed. I knew this was only the beginning. I could not sleep after that night. I watched the ceiling in the dark, listening to the soft breathing of my daughter, Lily, down the hall. Rebecca slept beside me like nothing was wrong. I kept seeing that word in my head. Single. It felt like I had been erased while still standing there. The next day, I called our accountant and asked for a meeting. He closed his office door and lowered his voice like the walls could hear. He showed me tax forms from the last few years. Each time, her status was marked single. Separate filings. Separate accounts. Even claims I had never seen before. He slid one folder across the desk. "You might want to look closely at these." There were property records in only her name. She had told banks she was unmarried again and again. This was not one mistake. It was a plan. I felt angry, but the anger was deep, quiet, and steady, like heavy rain that did not stop. I walked out of the office knowing something important. I was not going to ask her again for soft answers. I was going to find the truth myself. On my way home, I decided one thing. I would stop trusting words and only trust paper. A week later, I found myself standing inside a real estate office I had never been in before. I was there about a mailing that came to our house with Rebecca's name on it. The agent greeted me with a bright smile that faded when I said, "I'm Rebecca's husband." She paused, then said, "I thought she was single." The words hit like a slap. My hands felt cold. She showed me a file. In it, there was a condo purchase application. Buyer, Rebecca Clark. Marital status, single. Spouse line, blank. I stared at the picture of the building. I had never heard of this place. My wife owned a home I did not know about. "Congratulations on your separate life," the agent said carefully, realizing too late what she had said. I walked outside and sat in my car. I watched people move along the street while I tried to make sense of my own life. My marriage was still alive in our house, with shared meals, shared chores, shared smiles. But on paper, I did not exist. Right there, I made a new choice. I would not confront her yet. I would watch. I would learn. And I would keep every piece of proof. The first break happened in our kitchen. Rebecca's phone buzzed on the counter while she was in the shower. I did not mean to look, but my eyes landed on the screen. It showed a message preview from her sister. "Have you finished protecting yourself before the storm?" My stomach turned. Before the storm. I unlocked the phone and read the full chat. They talked about accounts in her name, titles in her name, and keeping things safe. Safe from what? From me? From something she had done? There were also messages about staying single on record, because it made things easier if things went bad. I read those lines again and again. I felt like a stranger in my own life. When I heard the water turn off upstairs, I placed the phone exactly where it had been. I stood there, hands shaking just a little, but my face calm when she walked in. She smiled and kissed Lily on the head like any normal morning. But nothing felt normal anymore. That day I learned something important. She was not hiding accidentally. She was planning. I stopped being confused and started getting careful. The storm she talked about was coming, and I needed to be ready too. The next blow came at Lily's school. We were called in for a meeting about emergency contacts and records. The counselor slid a form across the table. I was supposed to check the address. My eyes landed on the top lines first. Parent or guardian, Rebecca Clark. Status, single. Second parent, Daniel Clark. Role, emergency contact. Emergency contact. Not father. Not guardian. Just someone you call if the real adult is busy. I kept my voice level, but something inside me hurt in a way I had not known before. I had been at every school pickup, every bus stop, every science fair. Yet on paper, I was optional. The counselor looked confused. "I thought you two weren't together," she said softly. Rebecca spoke first, smooth and quick. "It is just paperwork." To her, it was only ink. To me, it was my life being erased line by line. I said nothing in that moment. I signed where they asked me to sign. But inside, my decision grew stronger. She had rewritten our family on forms, at banks, at offices. I would no longer pretend I did not see it. I would gather every piece of the story until I had the whole picture. One evening, while looking for a receipt in Rebecca's purse, I saw a small white card tucked behind her wallet. It was from a family law attorney. My heart beat faster as I read the words printed under the name, Asset Protection and Separation Planning. It did not say divorce. It said protection. I placed the card on the table and waited for her to come into the room. She saw it, paused for half a second and then said in a calm voice, "Everyone should plan ahead." She had an answer ready, like she had practiced it in her head many times. She poured herself water and walked away. That moment told me more than any long talk could. She had prepared so much. Lawyers. New accounts. Homes in secret. A public life with me and a paper life alone. I did not follow her to argue. Instead, I sat down with a notebook and started writing dates, places, and what I had seen. I took photos of forms when I could. I began to build my own record. This was not just marriage trouble. This was a hidden system, set up over years. And I was done being the only one who had not seen it. I tried one more time that week to reach the real truth with simple words. We sat at the kitchen table after Lily went to bed. The house was quiet and warm, and for a moment it felt like old times. "Are you planning to leave me?" I asked. She did not cry. She did not shout. She folded her hands and said, "I need independence on paper. That is all." On paper. Those two words stayed in my mind. She spoke about how being listed as single made forms easier, how she wanted control of her life, how nothing had to change at home. Her voice was steady. Her eyes did not move away. But every answer felt rehearsed. Polite. There was a wall I could not see over. I realized something right then. I would not get the truth from questions because she believed her reasons were enough. She saw this as smart planning. I saw it as vanishing me. So that night, I stopped trying to fix her story with talk. Instead, I promised myself that I would protect my place as a father and as a person who mattered. I lay awake, looking at the darkness, understanding that love without honesty cannot hold up forever. The next step was mine. I called a lawyer and set up a meeting. Sitting in that office made everything feel real in a new way. The lawyer listened without interrupting while I laid out the forms, the condo, the tax filings, and the school records. He frowned in a focused way and said, "You need to document everything." He explained how being listed as single on legal documents could weaken my rights to property and decisions. On paper, it could look like I had no role in what we built together. A marriage can live in a house, he said, while being erased in files. The words were simple, but they landed hard. We talked about custody, finances, and future safety. He did not push revenge. He pushed fairness and proof. He told me something else important. Do not rush. I walked out of his office with a folder in my hand that felt heavier than its weight. Inside were forms, advice, and a plan to protect myself and Lily. For the first time since this began, my fear felt like it had somewhere to go. It turned into calm action. I knew now that when the time came, I would not be empty-handed. A few days later, Rebecca's parents came for dinner. They laughed with Lily and talked about old stories. For a moment, everything looked normal, like a photo in a frame. But then her mother said something that made my fork stop in midair. "I am proud of how you manage on your own," she told Rebecca. "Single mother life is not easy." Single mother. No one looked surprised except me. That meant they had heard this before. They spoke as if I were a visitor, not part of the core family. I saw pity in her father's eyes, not toward her but toward me, like I was too weak to understand my own life. I stayed quiet through the meal. I watched the way the story had already been told to others. In their version, Rebecca stood alone, strong and independent. In reality, we shared bills, mornings, rides, worries and bedtime stories for Lily. After they left, I washed the dishes in silence. I felt something inside settle, hard and clear. I was done being the ghost at my own table. Nothing I said that night would change years of stories. But the truth was now steady in me. I was not crazy. I had been erased. At the bank a week later, I asked to review account ownership details. The manager was polite but cautious, like he was walking on ice. He pulled up screens, printed papers and showed signatures that I recognized. What I did not expect was the video. He turned his monitor slightly so I could see. There was Rebecca, sitting at a desk across from another clerk, smiling lightly. I watched her speak and shake her head when asked about a spouse. She signed the form where it said, single. She did it without pause, like she had done it many times. The manager said, she insisted on individual accounts. I thanked him and walked out into the sunlight, blinking. Seeing it happen, not just reading it, changed something in me. It was no accident. No confusion. It was a script. I no longer felt lost. I felt determined. That evening, I placed new copies into my growing folder at home. It was no longer just paper. It was the story of how my life had been rewritten without my consent. I looked at the folder and knew this was the same envelope I would one day hand to her. Not to hurt her, but to stop being invisible. I began noticing small changes in the house that I had missed before. Frames in Rebecca's home office that once held family pictures now showed only her and Lily. On her desk at work, when I visited, there were photos of the two of them smiling at the beach. I was gone from every image. Her social media said, single. Old posts with me were hidden from view. It was like watching someone cut themselves out of every picture, one careful line at a time. I tried to joke about it once, asking why I had disappeared from her profiles. She shrugged and said, people do not need to know everything. That answer sounded harmless, but I knew it matched everything else. On paper, online, in offices, in stories told to family. I still helped Lily with homework every night. I still cooked dinner twice a week. I still kissed my wife on the cheek before work. But I also knew the truth. In her written life, she stood alone. I stopped asking why I was gone. I focused on making sure I could not be pushed out of my daughter's life or our real world, no matter what any paper said. One night, I woke up to the soft sound of Rebecca's voice in the hallway. I stayed still and listened. She was whispering on the phone, and I could hear fear mixed with control in her tone. If it goes wrong, everything is in my name, she said. I made sure of that. I am single on record. They cannot touch what is mine. The words froze me in place. This was not about fear of me. It was about something bigger, something she had done or was tied to. She was protecting assets, not hearts. She was preparing for a wrong that she expected to come. When she came back to bed, she thought I was asleep. I kept my breathing slow. Inside, thoughts were racing. Something was happening at her job or in her finances that she had kept hidden. I realized then this was not only betrayal of trust. It was risk. If something bad was coming, she had built a wall that left me and Lily standing alone on the other side. I stared into the darkness and knew two things. First, she had reasons I still did not see. Second, those reasons did not excuse erasing me. The next call came from her workplace. HR needed a signature from me. They said, connected to her dependent. The word confused me. I asked for clarification and learned that she had declared herself single at work too. Their voice on the phone was careful. She listed you as not in the household. I ended the call and sat in silence for a full minute. She had taken benefits, made claims and told her employer she stood alone. On paper, I was not part of her life or support system. It hit me then how much she had gained from being single. Extra benefits. Extra control. Extra privacy. That night, I did not confront her. I simply added the new information to my folder. Every page made the picture clear. This was no emotional drift. No slow sadness between two people. This was structure. She wanted everything cleanly in her name in case anything fell apart. I was there to carry weight but not share rights. The hurt changed shape again. It was no longer just pain. It was clarity. I finally understood the pattern. I also knew that my answer would not be shouting. It would be steady and final. The biggest shock came from a locked drawer in her desk at home. I found the key by accident while cleaning. Inside was a thin stack of papers clipped together. At the top was the title of a will. My name appeared only once, described as non-custodial father. My hands tightened on the paper. Lily's guardianship was listed with her sister if something happened. My role in my own daughter's life had been reduced to a few cold words. I sat there for a long time, the room silent around me. It was one thing to erase me from bank forms. It was something else to write me out of the future. She walked in and saw the open drawer. For the first time since this started, I saw fear flash across her face. Not anger. Fear. We did not fight. She simply said, "You were not supposed to see that." I put the papers back without a word. But inside me, another line had been crossed. She had already planned a life where I barely existed if anything went wrong. I knew then that I would never allow Lily to think I disappeared by choice. One day soon, the truth would have to stand in the light. It was Rebecca's friend, Maya, who finally broke the silence. We met by chance at a coffee shop. She looked tired and nervous when she saw me. After a few minutes of small talk, she sighed deeply. "She has been planning this for years," Maya said softly. "She wants maximum control. She thought it was smart." I listened without speaking. Maya explained how Rebecca feared losing everything if her company's problems grew, so she built a life where she alone owned things. That way, nothing could be taken through me. "She does love you," Maya added, almost pleading. "Just in her own way." I nodded, though the words hurt. Love that erases you does not feel like love. Walking home, I felt oddly calm. Finally, the full truth had a shape. This was not about leaving me. It was about using me without risking anything herself. I had been partner in reality and stranger in law. That night, I opened my folder and added what Maya told me to my notes. This was the story in full now. There would be no more guessing. The next phase would not be about learning. It would be about acting. Rumors began to surface about Rebecca's company. I heard them from a neighbor first, then from the news. Investigations. Audits. Words like misreporting and financial review floated through conversations. Suddenly, her late nights, tight answers, and careful planning made even more sense. She was trying to keep everything she could out of reach if the business went down. It also meant that while she was protecting herself, she had also left me open. If anything touched our family, my name might be tied to things I did not know about, while hers stayed safe on paper as single. The realization chilled me. That night at dinner, she was quiet, distracted. Lily talked about school, and we both listened, but the air between Rebecca and me felt heavy. We were sitting together while standing in different worlds. I did not yell or accuse. Instead, I watched her carefully and understood something important. She was afraid, and she had chosen control instead of trust. I could not fix her fear, but I could stop my erasure. The storm she prepared for was here now, and I would no longer face it blindfolded. I spent a Saturday at the dining table surrounded by papers. I laid out everything I had gathered over the past months. Forms, copies, screenshots, bank statements, school files, notes from meetings. I built a timeline from the first single document to the latest one. Seeing it in order felt like watching a movie about my own life from the outside. Step by step, she had created a world where I did not exist on paper. I placed everything into one large envelope. It was thick and full of proof. This was not for revenge. It was for truth. I needed something solid when I finally spoke clearly. As I sealed the envelope, I felt strangely calm. I had moved from confusion to pain, from pain to clarity, and from clarity to action. This envelope was not about ending everything. It was about saying, I am here. I matter. I will not be erased quietly. I put it in a drawer where I could reach it easily. I knew the moment to use it would come on its own. I just had to be ready. The shift happened over something small. Rebecca asked me to sign a new joint loan document she had already filled out. Before, I might have signed without reading. This time, I took my time. There it was again. She was marked as single. I would only be a co-signer, not an equal owner. I looked up and said calmly, "We will review this together before I sign anything." She froze. For the first time, I saw her expression change. Not anger first, but worry. She realized I was no longer walking in the dark. She asked, "Do you not trust me?" I answered simply, "I need things to be honest." We said little else. But the power balance had shifted. She knew I had stopped being silent and easy. That night, she watched me more closely than usual, as if she were trying to see how much I knew. I kept my calm, talked with Lily, and washed the dishes. But inside, I knew we had crossed into a new stage. The envelope in the drawer was no longer a plan. It was becoming close to its moment. The next big crack came at Lily's school again. We were called for another meeting about field trip permissions and contact updates. The administrator casually asked why I was still not listed as guardian. I answered without anger, "Because my wife has listed herself as single on documents." The room went quiet. Rebecca's eyes widened. For a second, she looked like someone who had been pulled onto a stage without warning. The administrator blinked, unsure what to say. I stayed calm and kind, focusing on Lily's needs. But everyone heard the truth now. The story Rebecca had shaped outside was no longer safe from light. On the drive home, she gripped the steering wheel tight. She did not speak, and I did not rush her. We both knew something important had happened. Her version of reality had been spoken out loud in front of others. That night, she avoided my eyes. The silence in the house was louder than words. I felt sad but also lighter. I had stopped guarding her story ahead of my own existence. There was no going back from that. The confrontation finally came 2 nights later. Rebecca placed her phone down and said, "You have been watching me." I answered, "I have been seeing what was already there." Her voice rose as she accused me of spying, of not trusting, of trying to trap her. I did not shout back. I simply walked to the drawer, took out the envelope and placed it on the table. One by one, I showed her copies of forms where she marked herself single. Bank papers, school papers, tax papers, work documents, the condo purchase, the will. Her face went pale. She saw not anger in my actions but accuracy. She also saw the risk she had created, not only for herself but for us. For the first time, she had no quick answers. We sat in heavy silence. Our whole marriage stood between us, full of love, daily life and quiet secrets that had grown like roots under the floor. I said gently, "This cannot continue." She looked down, and I saw something break inside her mask. Not power, not control, just tiredness and fear. A day later, my lawyer called again. We reviewed everything I had collected and talked about next steps. He spoke clearly about what could be fixed and what could not be undone. We discussed protecting custody of Lily, making finances honest, and correcting records where possible. None of it was about hurting Rebecca. It was about stopping the erasure and building a fair path forward. When I hung up, I added new documents to the envelope. Now it held not only proof but also a draft agreement. It protected Lily first, then our rights, then our property. Holding the envelope, I felt firm but not cruel. What I wanted was simple. I wanted truth and clear lines. If she chose honesty, we could rebuild something real. If she chose control again, then we would separate with fairness instead of lies. The envelope had become more than paper. It was a turning point. I placed it back in the drawer, knowing exactly what I would say when the moment came. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. The hardest talk was with Lily. We sat together on the couch, the 3 of us. I spoke slowly, choosing words that told the truth without placing blame. I said that papers had not been honest and that our family needed to fix that. I told her she was safe and loved by both of us. Rebecca stayed quiet at first. Then she looked at Lily and saw the worry in her eyes. Something in Rebecca's face softened. Maybe for the first time, she saw that her choices were not only lines on forms. They were walls that our daughter could feel but not understand. Lily asked if we were breaking apart. I pulled her close and said, "We are making sure things are honest so nothing breaks by surprise." After Lily went to bed, Rebecca sat alone at the table for a long time. She looked smaller, like the weight she carried had finally shown itself on the outside. That night, there was no fight. Only quiet and truth sitting between us like a shared object we could finally both see. A week later, the letter arrived. It was from an agency reviewing benefit filings. They needed clarity about differences between Rebecca's single status and other records. It was formal, calm and real. Rebecca read it twice. Her hands trembled slightly. The outside world had caught up to our private storm. This was no longer only between husband and wife. She looked at me then, not as someone to control, but as someone she needed to face. The systems she thought she could manage alone were now asking questions. I did not say, "I told you so." I only said, "We will answer with the truth." For the first time, she nodded without argument. The wall she had built to protect herself had started to trap her instead. The stakes were now beyond emotion. They were legal, financial, and real. The envelope in my drawer was no longer just a symbol. It was the cleanest path forward. I knew the time had come. That evening, when the house was quiet, I took out the envelope and placed it in front of Rebecca. She did not push it away this time. She opened it with slow, careful hands. Inside were all the documents, organized and clear. There was also the agreement my lawyer and I had prepared. It did not punish her. It demanded honesty. It protected Lily. It required shared ownership, correct status, and open records. As she read, tears filled her eyes, not from anger but from understanding. The phrase in the title of my life formed silently in my mind. This envelope changed everything because it forced the truth into the open. I said, "We cannot live one life at home and another on paper." She nodded, tears finally falling. She saw how far her choices had gone, how deep the cuts had reached, and how steady my response had been. The envelope sat between us like a line we could not step back over. Whatever happened next would be honest. We sat together for a long time without speaking. The house was quiet, and Lily slept upstairs, unaware of the turning point happening below. Rebecca finally said, "I do not want to lose my family." Her voice was small and real. I told her, "Then choose truth." She looked at the agreement again. There were only two real paths now. We fix the records, correct the past, and build with honesty, or we separate with fairness and respect. There was no path where I stayed invisible while carrying the weight of a life I did not exist in on paper. Her expression held fear, regret, and something like relief. Control was heavy. Letting go of it hurt, but it also freed her. The story ends with her holding the pen, the pages before her, the future open and unwritten. I was no longer erased. I was present, clear and steady. Whatever choice she made, everything had already changed, because I had finally handed her the envelope that told the full truth of our lives.